Salve, salve, guys! Antes de vocês verem esse vídeo, só gostaria de dar um disclaimer. Essa entrevista foi gravada há mais ou menos um mês e meio e eu tava esperando a season nova do Poi pra postar. Eu tive uma oportunidade muito da hora de conversar com o Jonathan, da GGG. Ele falou muita coisa da hora. Espero que vocês curtam a entrevista, essa oportunidade foi muito bacana. Boa sorte pra todo mundo aí que vai estar começando aí a próxima liga, que é a Settlers of Kalgur. E é isso, mano. Bora pro vídeo. Obrigadão e é nóis. Dali! Hey guys, I'm here with Jonathan Rogers, the game director for Path of Exile 2. And Jonathan, before we get started, please introduce yourself to everyone who's watching over here.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm the game director on Path of Exile 2. I was one of the founders of Grinding Gear Games originally, and at some point I kind of, ended up being the person kind of mainly in charge of PoE 2, along with Mark, of course, who's does a huge amount as well. But that's kind of where I'm from. But I've been at Grinding Gear Games since the very beginning.
Right, that's awesome. And how long have you been in development of Path of Exile 2? Because I guess everyone's super excited about it.
Yeah. I think we started probably around 2017, actually. It's been quite a long time. It might have even been slightly in 2016. I'm not sure of the exact moment. But the project's kind of changed a lot over the years from what it was originally. So when we started, it didn't have the scope that it has now. But I think if you were to technically look at that stuff, it might even be towards the end of 2016 that we really got going.
I see. That's awesome. It's been for a long time though, then, right?
Yeah, it definitely took longer than we were hoping. I mean, when we announced in 2019 at ExileCon, I don't even remember what we said at the time, but we certainly blew through that deadline. It's been a long road for sure.
But I definitely believe that the longer, like, if it has to take a long while, like, it has to take a long while. And
I still feel like we could have gone faster, but I'm always kind of pushing for, like, I really want to get this damn game done. But for sure, these things, I guess the scope is so high that we ended up it just has ended up being a very long project. But thankfully we've got PoE1 kind of there so our company's fine with regard to this. Like, we can do a long development period, and then that's okay. But it certainly went on longer than I'd hoped.
I got you. Let me just adjust the video here real quick so I can put it on the other screen. There we go. Perfect. Sorry about that. Regarding the development time that it's been taking for Path of Exile 2, I have to ask, what has been the most challenging part in developing Path of Exile 2 in general?
I think probably there's been a few things. So one of them is that we really want to make sure there's this thing called second system syndrome, which is like the feeling that, like, when you make a second thing, you're like, we have to fix every single problem that we had in the original thing. You know what I mean? And so that sort of leads to the situation where we're like, okay, we have to redo this system, we have to redo that system. Like, there's so much kind of that going on. And there's also a lot of just like learning lessons again of, like, it's easy to sometimes to forget why things were the way they were when you did them more than a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's like we'll change something and it takes quite a long time to realize it's not working, and then sometimes we end up changing even things back, or just like it can take quite a while of that sort of like iterating to really get to the point where things are working again. So that's been challenging, right? I mean, you've got the challenge of just like making all the content, and that is a thing. But on some level, it's kind of like you understand how that can be. But when it comes to game design challenges, you never know how long it could take to get things working. Like, you might have to try 100 iterations, or maybe you get it right on the first try. So that can just kind of give you an unbounded amount of difficulty with that kind of stuff, which is I would say one of the just main challenging parts about developing a game in general.
I see. So basically reformulating like the original systems that you guys have in general.
For sure. I mean, like, some of them, my initial thought was that we could take most of them over as they were. And that is true to some extent, but then every time you kind of come to address something, you're like, well, why is this way? Can we make it more understandable? This kind of thing. I kind of want everything to be open to potentially being able to be changed. But it does certainly mean that you end up spending a lot of time in the weeds. And I think even a lot of the things that we did right back at the start of PoE1, even PoE1 kind of lost over time. Like, we forgot certain elements. Like, and I'm talking like really specific little details about like exactly the way that damage numbers might be, like right at the start of the game and things like that. And coming back to it again and kind of having to do that stuff again is pretty interesting because I start to remember all of the things we did way back that I'd actually forgotten about. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, we did this thing, we did that thing. Like, it's actually quite interesting that, like specific damage numbers on specific monsters, like, making it so that you can have, for example, like you allocate your first passive and it always reduces the number of hits to kill from 3 down to 2, like by utilizing the rounding and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's all these little details like that that you have to do to make sure it's exactly right. That kind of stuff is just like, that little detail work is quite interesting to have to go back and do again.
That makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of numbers in PoE. Like, there's a lot of
for sure.
A lot of different things that go into the equation. Like, at least myself as a player, when I look at it, like, we see how in depth the system is. I cannot imagine how in depth it must be for the developer itself to see so many layers.
Well, one of the concerns I also have about that is that PoE 2, I think, has much more potential for explosion of things due to the fact that the skill system having, so many 6 links, having so many more things where you've got opportunity, therefore so many more opportunities to use things across classes. And we do most of our testing. When we're doing most of our testing, we're kind of doing things like, within the realm of what you'd expect to do within the class. But because there's all sort of cross-class pollination, I think that the potential for like crazy stuff that we didn't anticipate is extremely high. So we might end up in a situation where we get like all sorts of things that are happening that we didn't expect, which is a worry for sure. As I said, there's potential for a big explosion there, but we'll just have to see how that goes. It is we can never really know until we get enough players to be able to actually find that stuff, I suppose.
For sure, like there's a lot of things that can happen when you get like this cross-class stuff going on, and that's really cool. That's something that's really exciting for the theory crafters out there, for sure. Like, but yeah, let me check the next thing I have written about that. Oh yeah, there was one thing you said actually that made me a little bit pensive, which was what is a problem exactly? Because you're like talking, we have to fix our problems. What is like qualified as a problem when it comes into developing PathXL 2?
So you mean like one of the things I mentioned about like, okay, well, there's a million, right? Like, so the question is like, we could go like to some crazy high level issue, like one of the big ones being like, melee, how are we going to, improve things there? Like the combat fear, like all that stuff, right? That's like a high level problem. And then there's like tiny little problems. Like you look at the like equation for armor and you're like, okay, this isn't working for various reasons. We need to like find a way. And then like you've got these tensions of like, okay, should we do some crazy armor formula that like exactly perfectly models what you should have scaling through the game, which ends up being some like 4th power polynomial thing, like, or do we make some really simple equation and trying really hard to kind of control the mods that you get and the places where you get armor to make it so that it kind of the items fit the equation, but yet you can have a simple equation. Like this is an example of that's just a random thing I was dealing with last week that is annoying. And the thing is that it like that stuff you could just go for hours and hours and hours and hours about it. And I mean, even something like 4 days ago we had like some 6-hour conversation about what was it? It was to do with the way that like minion damage scales or something like that. Like it was just some like extremely specific thing, and it can take so long to kind of come up with something that like actually doesn't have any kind of issues that we can see. And I think one of the curses of having experience in game development and running a game for so long is that you know of so many problems that just about any solution you come up with has got some kind of problem that we've run into in the past that kind of defeats it. And I think that actually can be a downside for experienced developers because sometimes just YOLOing things in and just trying stuff can actually like end up like it gets you faster towards an end result, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, we don't want to just like blunder into a mistake that we should have seen coming. It's like kind of a tough balance there. You really have to be careful with that. But I don't know whether it's worthwhile to spend 6 hours talking about some random specific thing, like when you've got, sort of a short amount of time before you release, but it kind of just ends up happening because, like something needs to work and we're having trouble with this. And, like the damage on this thing is not right, towards the end game, like something ain't right about it. We have to solve those kinds of problems. So it can be tough.
It makes sense. It is like all the experience sometimes can be like a double-edged sword, you think? Like every once in a while, yeah. Like it was, you kind of cut off one of my questions there. Like I was gonna talk about melee after, but I guess I guess we'll just talk about that later. But here, another question that I had, and a lot of people actually submitted this to me, was how much of PoE's resources, like Path of Exile resource, are currently being allocated in PoE 2, and how
So
exactly? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, so a pretty significant portion of the company is working on PoE two. Like I don't know the percentage, but like there's certainly way more PoE two developers than PoE one developers right now. And like all of the growth that the company has seen over the last 5 years, most of that growth has been to support PoE two development rather than PoE one development, for sure. But what I'm imagining is that like once we get into the release, it will be easier to have more people even working on PoE one than right now. Like when you're kind of like gearing up and trying to get that first big like content bundle out, it just takes a huge amount of developers to support something like that. Yeah, I think our company is around. I always get this number wrong, but I think it's around 200 people, something like that.
It's a lot of people.
So you know, and there's like I think probably it's maybe just a very small amount over 100 people working on PoE 2. But then you've kind of got also a bunch of support staff who kind of don't really qualify as working on one game or the other. They're like, you know, well, yes, like support and like server admins and web developers and all that kind of other various things, you know. And those aren't really PoE one developers either. So then whatever remains after you take all of those out, that's the PoE one team. So you kind of end up with, you know, like it's sort of gone about that way. But then that doesn't even count the army of outsourcing contractors and things like that. That you also have, you know, like the you know, so it ends up being like quite a crazy production. Well, at some point, one of these days, we'll have to write the credits, and then we'll really see how crazy it is. But yeah, it's certainly fairly large.
That's interesting. How do you guys plan on like working with both games out and like after PoE 2 is released?
Well, it's certainly going to be a challenge. So the main thing, of course, is that they're offset by 6 weeks each. 6 weeks, you know, between each like cycle. Sorry, not 6 weeks. Is that right? So 1.5 months. Yeah, that is 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 months for each game is what the league cycle is. So therefore, 6 weeks between each one. And that could be challenging. What I'm kind of mostly worried about there is that, you know, you've got this cycle at the moment where, you know, like there's kind of this like definitely a ramping up of heat in the studio as you get towards a league cycle. And so the concern would be that like you've kind of got that happening like double the number of times than before, which could get very stressful. Like it isn't even necessarily the number of hours a week that someone's working. It's also just like the general just like feeling of tension that you have that can be quite stressful. And I think the only way to really get away from that is to really make sure the teams aren't like there's not too much crossover as far as the stress from one team to the other. Like just making sure that that's going to be okay. But I mean, the hard part can be, of course, like concentration on one project versus the other. Like, you know, like I mean, I'm going to be definitely myself concentrating exclusively on PoE 2. But there are other people that need to be worrying about both of those projects, and that can be very tough. Like in particular, Mark. You know, I honestly don't know how it will actually end up feeling when we do it, but I believe it is that we can do it, and we'll just see how it is when we get there. But yeah, like as I said, it's mostly what I'm worried about is not so much like could we create the content. I think that's fine. We've got enough developers to do that. It's more of a question of the stress in the studio, especially for the people, you know, like having involved in both projects. That would be the concern.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. I also like wanted to know how you guys plan on when you bring out new content, like a fresh new idea. How would you like divide this idea? Like, are we gonna launch this in PoE 1, PoE 2? Like, how would league content work out for this sort of dynamic?
I don't really see something as like at the end of the day we'll do what's best for each game, and I wouldn't want to hold something back from one game just because we're putting in the other like that. Like if it makes sense, then we can do it in both. But like I still think that keeping the content distinct is more interesting because it will mean that you know, like if you're playing both games, you've kind of got new stuff happening in both games all the time. But that doesn't necessarily mean they can't share assets and things like that. Like there's been a couple of cases where we've like had bosses that were made to go in PoE 2, and then we've taken them and made like a PoE 1 boss fight out of it that shares some animations but like has different stuff going on, and then that boss will still be in PoE 2. There's not like that many of those, but like there's certainly some. And if you look at the fights in both places, like they are different because they have to be different due to the various considerations around like both the quality level you need to achieve, but also the like stuff to do with the way the gameplay sort of is in terms of timings and everything. But like that sort of stuff happens. That might still continue to happen. But ideally, when we're doing that, it's done in such a way that you would never notice as a player. Like, you know, if you're looking, like, you might notice, but, you know, like, it's kind of something that, like, you shouldn't really be thinking, oh, they just duplicated this, you know what I mean? Like, it should feel like this is a distinct content. It's just that, you know, we shared some assets in some cases. So that can happen. And one of the kind of funny things is that some of the assets that that we made for PoE2, you know, 6 years ago, are now look like too old looking to be in PoE2 anymore. And then those assets are then getting put in PoE1 because they look fine that contributes to that. And then getting remade for new assets getting remade for PoE2. So that's kind of a funny one, but yeah.
It's actually pretty cool. You guys end up like bringing stuff to PoE1 while working on PoE2.
Sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, so now I'm gonna dive into more of the gameplay aspect and less about the development aspect. And basically, the number one question that I've also had was that will PoE2 have a less complex newer play experience? Because PoE is an intimidating game for newcomers, no doubt. Like, as when I'm streaming the game and I open the passive troop, people are like, what? Like, a lot of people who never seen the game before will be like, the shock value is there. So is there an approach being taken for this new player experience?
I think about this a lot, and there is a lot going on with that for sure. I think one of the really important things is that we give more guidance with regards to, and like you'll see this when you go to select skills and skill gems and things like that. Like, so PoE2, we're being very careful to make sure that everything is done in such a way that you're never locked in. Like, we certainly don't class restrict abilities, we don't do anything like that, right? But at the same time, it is nice in the UI to almost present things like, here is the obvious path of like stuff that is designed for your class. If you just pick this stuff, you're going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to fall off and not be able to, like, you know, not be able to get through the campaign and like all that sort of stuff. And I think that's pretty important. And I don't think that PoE1 really does that. And for example, a thing we just did since the last time we showed the game. So we had that event in LA where we got people to play, and one of the things that people said in that event was, oh, you know, there aren't enough support gems aren't mattering, and so on. And so since then we've like taken a big long hard look at support gems again. We've changed how the system works, and one of the things in the system now is that when you get a thing called an uncut support gem, when you use that, it gives you a list of the skills you have equipped, and then it recommends like you can pick what support gem you want, and like you could click the like all gems button and just go wild. There's like the whole big giant list of gems there. But if you like, the default view is that you see like, here's your skills, here are it actually is tiers, so as you go through the game you get more options, but effectively at each tier here's 3 options that are just things that like will make the skill better. You know what I mean? Like, because there's like a million things that like that will work, right? But if they don't make the skill better, really, it's kind of like you just are wasting your time. It's like a noob trap, right? You're picking this, it's not actually helping you. It may sound kind of like it does, but it doesn't really. So we are saying like, here are 3 things that if you equip them, that will be like a reasonable improvement to your skill per tier, and then you've got a few tiers of that. And if we're doing our job correctly, there's still going to be like stuff that is not, you know, that's like off class or off theme or whatever, like, you know, that like you could still pick that would be even better than that. But at least like, here are some solid options for you that are going to work, and, you know, like you pick that, you know, like the skill's going to get more interesting, you're going to have some more fun ideally, and you know, you're not going to stray too far from like the path that will lead you down a road where you don't have enough damage and you can't kill anything and you're kind of wondering, what the hell did I do wrong, you know? Yeah. So I think that's pretty important, but it is a somewhat divisive thing, right? Because like an example that came literally yesterday was there's like a less duration support in PoE. Obviously, if you first see that as a player, you might be like, oh, what the hell would I want this for? But then there are certain skills where like less duration actually improves them, because like, you know, it's some time that's taken to you know, before some effect happens, something like that. And one of our developers was saying that he was worried, like, oh, you're putting less duration on this like recommended list, but that sort of robs me of the feeling of like, I worked something out and I feel clever. And to some extent that is true, right? Like that's a worry that we would have. So we have to balance that and so on. But I think it is still important to give people like an obvious path. And like, maybe for something like that, we've got a couple of options. Like, one of them is like, okay, maybe we don't put that one in, even though it is good for the skill. We pick something else that is also good, that's like obvious, if you know what I mean. So that the like less obvious stuff is there for the build people to find out. But the solution I like even more than that is like, well, why not have 100 other things that we didn't even, that are like interesting things. So like, so long as you got enough options that are like interesting outside of the kind of stuff that is presented to you, obviously, then I think that that's still okay. So yeah, like it's certainly a tension, but I personally am a believer that we do need to make the path of like, just like your basic player's path when they first start the game does need to be something that they're not going to just run into a complete roadblock on. And so we're doing our best to kind of make sure that that is the case. So yeah.
That's really good to hear. That's awesome. And that was really creative as well. Like that whole, the game kind of recommends you stuff that works out so you're not stuck on a roadblock. That was really creative. I really like that answer. Also, regarding the campaign, how will replayability work? Like, after I'm done for the campaign, will I be able to skip it? Do I have to do it with every single character? How will that work out?
So I'm not a fan of campaign skips. It's just one of those things that I'm just really like. It just completely destroys the feel of the characters for me. So we're definitely not going to do that. And it's another thing that's really important is that within each league, everyone's on the same like. Each league is a fresh start. Everyone's on the same like on the same. Sorry, what's the word? The playing field is even. You know what I mean? Like everyone's starting from the same place. The moment that you have some people who have like played like. In a traditional MMO, you have this thing where it's like, the people who have played for ages, they have a head start. And so any new player is going to feel like, well, even though, it would take me forever to be able to catch up. And even in PoE, where the only thing you have between leagues is knowledge, people still feel that way. So I certainly don't want to make that worse by having it so that, like that fresh start, greenfield thing does feel good. And I really want to make sure that that's still the case. But one thing that is definitely the case is that your second character within a league is always going to be faster, and it's even more so in PoE 2 because of gold, because you get the gold is shared across characters, of course. So that means that buying stuff from the shop, and the shops are actually good; they sell good items so that actually does accelerate you pretty hard. So I think that your second playthrough is going to be a pretty different experience than your first if you're playing in the same league, just due to the fact you got that acceleration from the shop.
Awesome, that's really good to hear. Like the whole gold system, how is it implementing that in PoE 2? Because right now we have the Chaos Orb is basically our main currency divine.
Well, gold is still not a trading currency. The purpose of gold, what the purpose of gold is to lower the variance at the bottom end that players can experience. So what I mean by that is that if you've got completely random item drops, then you could get anything. You could get very unlucky, you could get very lucky. What gold does is give you an avenue to select what items that you need for your character so that you can fix the holes in whatever it was that you found, because the shop is there to kind of like, like if you don't have enough defense, you can buy good armor, you don't have enough damage, you can buy a good weapon. Like, generally speaking, your character isn't going to fail to get like literally everything, right? Like generally speaking, there's going to be some hole where you failed to find something just because like the RNG just meant that you didn't find it. So gold it really does improve the bottom end. We've actually made it a lot more generous since we had the LA event as well. So the feedback at that event was like, oh, you don't get enough gold to find anything, that doesn't feel like things sell for enough, so on. We've actually made that quite a lot more generous, and it actually has improved the feel quite a lot. You do get enough gold to buy things. It feels quite nice. Like I personally feel like very frequently I'm spending down to 0, but then I'm getting more again and then spending again later. Like it's working out pretty well, and I think we'll kind of managed to get that. I think we've dialed that in pretty well now. It did take a while though to kind of get that to feel in the right place, it is working, and I think the game is much better for it as well. I think it's definitely a good improvement.
Awesome, perfect. I'm looking forward to see how gold works out in the game. Do you think it's more of an early game thing then, right?
I mean, it is not in the sense that you get gold through the game, and there are still valuable items you can find, but and it's especially not in the sense that the trading system for PoE 2 uses that as a So, I mean, I've talked before about how we're going to have instant buyout stuff in PoE 2, and because gold isn't tradable itself, it's used as a way to effectively limit the amount of trade you can do without playing more, right? Like, because there's a cost to each transaction in gold, as well as currency that you transfer to the other player. And so in the end game, what you're going to mostly be wanting gold for is trade. In the early game, what you're mostly wanting gold for is all of that shop stuff. And then, of course, the other thing is respecing, because that's done with gold now as well.
Awesome.
So you don't have to find orbs of regret. There's a cost per thing, and at the beginning of the game, it's quite cheap, like per level, and as you go through the game, it gets a bit more expensive to kind of not too much more, because you've got more nodes to respec as well, but it's enough so that that you don't want to just like respec your character right back to 0 and do it again without really thinking about it, at least.
I see.
It kind of makes the early game respecing a bit less of a problem. It's quite cheap to kind of just experiment right at the start.
So you still gotta be wary of how much gold you spend. You kind of have to like work out. Gotcha. Awesome.
Sure.
Perfect. Here we go. What can we expect to be brought over or freshly made and catered towards the end game of Path of Exile 2? So
I suspect that in the long term, a very large percentage of PoE 1 stuff will be brought over, but always modernized and brought into how it should be in PoE 2. Initially, it won't be like, when we go into early access, there won't be as much stuff as I had hoped would get in there at the start, but still enough that it feels like there's quite a bit going on in Endgame. Like, you need to have enough content there that it's working, but it's certainly not going to be PoE 1 in scale in terms of all that extra stuff. But we will be able to very rapidly get that stuff in once we'll finish working on PoE 2's exclusive content. Because as we get to early access, we'll have done most of that stuff, or at least getting to the point where almost all of it's done. So that means it'll be very quick to get a lot of that stuff in, and that's because, at least my hope is that because the design is done, it's very easy. Like, if you've got like a pre-made design, and then you're like, okay, just make the art look good, just get the VFX up to date, and just tweak all the numbers to get like in line with PoE 2. That's like a very easy exercise to like kind of effectively fan out to a lot of staff, because it's like the goal is known. Like, one of the hardest things in game development is when you don't know what the goal is and having to find it. So if you know what the goal is and you've already found the fun in that system, then it's very easy to just bring it across with just all the graphical updates and various balance updates and so on. Mm-hmm. So where that wouldn't be the case is if we find that, like, oh, this is so incompatible with PoE 2, we have to like rethink how all this stuff works. And that would be when it would take longer and it'd be more annoying and you'd have to experiment. But I think that for the most part, we should be able to get a lot of that stuff going in PoE 2 pretty easily. So I think during the early access period, you'll see a lot of that content like very quickly starting to come in and extending out what's there in the end game.
Awesome. I'm a Blight lover myself, so I can expect Blight to show up in PoE 2.
Interesting. Well, I'm not going to promise any one thing, but I definitely know there are people out there who love it. So it's something that I think could be a good one.
Yeah, we are a very niche crowd over here. The Blight people. Sure. every season. Right. So here, let me check the next one. Oh yeah, further elaborating on the endgame. What sort of endgame gameplay loop can we expect in the initial stages of PoE 2? Like, we know the several league mechanics, but since we're not having all of these mechanics right now, like, what is the game plan for, like, all right, PoE 2 is out, this is what we have for endgame?
So the fundamental mapping system is maps. It's different than how it was in PoE 1, but it is still fundamentally the map system. Like, it involves finding maps, crafting them, running them. It's the same basic core. The theming is quite different. Some of the mechanics are a bit different. There's some things that we feel like we've improved on there, but that is kind of the main initial thing. But there are definitely other sort of alternate endgame type things that will be at least a few there at launch. As I said, we'll add more and more of that during early access, so that there can be a lot. But I would hope that the map system just in itself should be a thing that people will enjoy. Like, going through a new map system for the first time should be an experience that is very enjoyable for to sort of get started on. Like, it's not like you've just got all these same maps that you've had forever. Like, there's like all the new bosses and all the new stuff to do with, like, all the map versions of bosses that are harder. Like, it's going to take people a while to just like get through all that stuff and like work out how to beat all these bosses and so on. So that's like a thing that I think should hopefully keep people going for quite a while before we start adding all the even more in-game things.
That's awesome. The one thing that I've seen a lot from all the PoE 2 footage, and a lot of people have seen as well, is that the gameplay looks a bit slower. Like, not in a negative way, but just slower in general. And that's another big question that I've had from a lot of people. Is that because it is early footage of like campaigns, or in Endgame are we gonna still have like that zoom gameplay where you just run with a mage blood and you kill everything in the screen?
I think that it will. It's honestly hard to completely say what we'll end up with. What I don't want to do is like feel like we're limiting the player. Like I certainly shouldn't feel like, oh, I can't do all the stuff that I could do in PoE 1. But at the same time, I just want to avoid the situation where you have sacrificed readability to the point where you can't even appreciate anything that's going on. Like being able to kill the like top tier boss in like 2 seconds, I don't think is quite right. Like, you don't get any chance to engage in the mechanic, and maybe player power should get to the point where that can happen. Like after like if you spend like a long time and get like everything fully optimized and everything, like maybe that should be able to happen. But certainly I don't think it should be that your experience is like you walk into maps and you already feel like a god. You know what I mean? Like where you like there needs to be a bit of earning that and kind of going through. But the thing is that like we are still a game that has a lot of like things that are out of control with regard to like, you know, like most games just don't let you like multiply your projectiles by 7. You know, like it's not like a thing that like we are still doing that. You know what I mean? And like we even talked about should we remove greater multiple projectiles? Like it was on the table of like, you know, do we want to get rid of that? Yeah, absolutely, right? Because we're like, okay, like it does cause a lot of problems. Like we're constantly having to balance around this. Like, should we just remove it? Like, get like there are so many headaches that GMP causes, and we're like, no, we cannot do that. It is actually important. We do actually want you to feel the power of like putting, you know, like using the skill and having the awesome thing. Like it is the player fantasy that PoE 1 delivers, and we wouldn't want to remove that fantasy. We just have to make sure that you know, we don't get to the point where it's like, you know, like 50 attacks a second kind of thing, where it just kind of goes beyond the point of like actually being even comprehensible. So it's like you could slow PoE 1 down 50% and you probably wouldn't even notice. Like it's so fast that that's like not even, you know, it's kind of a bit outrageous. And so yeah, like on a technical level, yes, it will be slower, but I honestly think that if you were a new player coming in, you'd be like, this game is hyperspeed still at Endgame, because of the fact that like you slow it down a lot and it's still very fast, you know. I guess that isn't really like a exact answer, but I guess it shows you that like our objective is still, we want you to feel like you can do broken shit. It's just that some of the actually really broken, like, you know, like melting the servers. Like actually one random thing, I probably told people this before, but the server costs for PoE 1 per like player is so much higher now than it was even like 3 years ago, because of the amount of spam that players do.
Really?
And yeah, it's about each player uses about 6 times more CPU time than they did 3 or 4 years ago, which is fine. Like that's okay. But I mean, like, still, it's kind of interesting just to see that like the level of crap going on has gotten pretty extreme.
Is it like the amount of projectiles on screen and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's just all that stuff, right? Like just creating projectiles and creating entities basically is just like, you know, it's a lot of work for the server to be doing constantly.
Dude, I had no idea.
Yeah,
that actually impacted.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can see it from the beginning of the number of players per server has to go down throughout the league. Like as people's builds get stronger, the number of players that can fit on a server goes down. So like that has to be like adjusted throughout the league, which is actually kind of, I mean, in a way that's fine, because like, you know, the players go down as well. So like you've got the initial launch and like the players per server is like not so bad. And then as you go on, like the players get more expensive, but there's less players to offset it. So it's kind of okay, but you know, it's kind of interesting.
That is super interesting,
yeah. But I suspect that we won't have quite as much of that problem in PoE 2, just because, or at least initially, just due to the like, you know, the slight reduction in number of objects created. But we'll see. It's honestly hard to tell. I mean, you can certainly, you know, now that we're doing more support gem stuff, like, because support gems are really the thing that like really gets you to the point of craziness. And so now we're kind of really starting to get all that spam that's starting to happen. I guess once again, I can't honestly completely say for sure where we end up, but I guess the North Star is always, when you equip this thing, you have to feel it, and in order for that to happen lots of times through the game, the end result of that has to be something pretty crazy. That I guess that's where you end up.
Super cool. That's actually super awesome that you're willing to share this with us. Thank you so much. That's super interesting. I'm pretty sure like 99% of people had no idea about that. But yeah, you talked about the projectiles in general. I actually had a projectile question here. Yeah, there we go. Projectile wise, are we still looking at the same pierce, chain, fork, and whatnot? Or are we looking at? Awesome.
Yep. there are a couple of them that I feel like I just kind of don't love, like returning projectiles to me. Like I've never always kind of been like, it's just some like I just don't really love that one, and so I'm kind of like I feel like maybe that one can go. But
Makes
in
sense.
general, all of the favorites that people love, they'll be coming back, and I'll probably talk more about support gems and how they work in PoE 2 because we've actually, as I said, we've done changes recently, a bit later on. But we were going down a path for a while where some of that stuff wasn't going to be okay, but now we've found a way to make it okay again, which I'm very happy with. So a lot of those support gems that people love are all fine and working and will be good in PoE 2 as well. Perfect.
Awesome. Now I'm going to move on a little bit towards the trading and crafting part of PoE 2. And a really broad question here, because I just couldn't find a way to phrase this without giving you like complete freedom to like go anywhere with your answer. What will the crafting system look like, honestly?
So there's a couple of things you could be referring to, because some people, when they talk about crafting, they're talking about systems like the crafting bench, and some people, when they're talking about crafting, are talking about like currency. What I would refer to crafting is like everything, the whole system of any time you're modifying an item. So to me, that includes currency, it includes the crafting bench, it includes every league that does like like something come out of item modification. The crafting system, I've talked a little bit about how the changes to the base crafting system, which was currency before, which is where we're trying to make it so that stuff on the ground is more often going to be your starting point rather than just starting from scratch. So like some of the changes have kind of led to that situation. If you don't know what I'm referring to, it's things like so we've changed Chaos Orb to be remove a mod then add a mod. And that what that means is that if Chaos Orb just like rerolls every mod on the item, then what that means is that any rare is as good as any other rare when it comes to being a crafting base, except for eye level and what the base type is.
That's true.
But if it's removable by add a mod, it's like, okay, I have to start with something that's got like maybe one good mod that I like. I just want to replace one of the others, try to get a good one. But then I also could brick that item and like get a different one. Like it actually means that the ground item you're starting with matters more. But there's also a few other random details, like for example, Orb of Alchemy now always creates a 4 mod rare, whereas items on the ground can be 4 to 6. So what that means is that if you go the route of like using alchemy, you're getting a less powerful rare than if you found one on the ground on average. But then of course you can exalt to get back up. So like the crafting, like there's nothing you can't get by crafting from white, but like it's generally going to be like better. Generally going to be better off by starting with something that already has some goodness to it that dropped on the ground. So that's like one philosophy there. On the other hand, we've all got all the other sort of like what you might call ancillary crafting systems. So you've got the crafting bench, and really the purpose of the crafting bench. Well, okay, actually, you know what? We haven't actually announced anything about that, so I'm going to stay away from that one because we're gonna we'll talk about that some other time. But
close, we almost got
that. We do have a system there for the crafting bench. I'm sorry, I keep on hitting my table and probably bumping the mic. So we do have a system for that as well. It's different than PoE 1's system. I think it's better. I think it'll lead to some interesting results. But then of course there's all the other ancillary crafting systems that come from leagues and so on. And I think like what will happen there, and I've talked a little bit about this before, but what I think will happen there is that we'll try to make sure that like all the depth of those systems is still retained, but we try to limit the scope of them to be like certain base types or certain mod types to make it so that you don't have to worry about them for most items most of the time. It's like if you're like, I want to get some good boots, you're like, maybe the set of systems that you need to worry about is not as big as it would be in PoE 1, where like literally everything works on everything. So trying to like limit the scope, I think, is a good idea. But I do like having all these different options in different systems. Like I think it's fun, and there's a certain type of player who just loves understanding all the different like little intricate things about the crafting system, and to come up with stuff. And I still want to make sure that those players feel like there's cool stuff to find and still interesting things to do. So that would be my philosophy about it.
I see. So we're still gonna have like the relatively simple setup. Like I need to slam some life into this armor, I slam some life, or I need to awaken orb this to get this and whatnot, get 2 base, whatnot. We're gonna have both tiers of stuff.
Oh, I would hope we can. Okay, like just because. Okay, there may be some things that are too complicated that we should just simplify, right? I'm not going to say that everything's going to be like the level of complexity needs to be the same, but I do think at least on a base level, crafting needs to be simple enough that you can like, because one of the main things crafting is for is what you might call, it's like gold, right? It's like fixing issues with your build. You need some resist here's a way to get that without having to be complicated, right? So being able to understand that is important. But the complicated stuff is more for the like crafting project of I want to achieve some item that has these specific things going on with it, that's like to do some specific niche build, as opposed to just like I need more cold resist, and like so that's why you need like a different type of system for that.
Gotcha. Awesome. Really good answer. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
The next one about that. But yeah, we see a lot of people talk about PoE's trading system. Some people like will talk about how they don't like trading with players directly. Some people will love it. What are we looking at for PoE 2?
Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about the fact that we are going to have instant buyouts in PoE 2. The way they're going to work ultimately is, I don't know if I've fully explained it before. I don't actually remember what is known and what isn't about it. But ultimately, there will be a way to do instant buyouts. It will be limited by, the instant buyouts at least, will be limited by gold. So that is to say that as well as you will set a price in currency, and then the system will also have a gold price that the person buying will also have to pay. So they have to pay the gold and the currency. The person gets the currency, the gold disappears. So that's kind of like the way to kind of keep it under control a little bit without like causing the economy to inflate away,
like a gold sink, right?
Forever. So yeah, the gold sink. Effectively, that's the kind of the basis for how it can be okay. To have instant buyouts in PoE. So obviously, what we're going to have to do with this is like really test how that works well when we go into early access, because it really is with trading systems like practically impossible to know how they work. I mean, you can do all the modeling you like, but you still have to actually test it when the rubber meets the road. But at the very least, it will be a lot easier for buyers than the current PoE1 system is. So it won't, because I do appreciate the fact that it is like over time it has gotten worse for buyers. Like having the hassle of that. So yeah, that's the I guess that's the main thing that we want to solve. Like even aside from anything else, is just we don't want the experience of buying to be so horrible as it currently is. So as long as we can achieve that, then I would say it's a success.
Gotcha. Also, a lot of third-party tools are used by some people, like path building. You will see people who need to like buy in bulk or sell in bulk and stuff like that. Are we gonna have like some quality of life changes to address that kind of stuff that other players kind of use?
So for bulk trading, we actually will have a market system that is more like the stock market, where you can place an order for like 200 chaos orbs or something like that, or how many it is that you want, like into large numbers. And that like for items that are just stackable currency, we can just have that. So that's actually a separate system from the item trading system, as it were.
Oh, really?
That will mean that as I said, we will have that, and so that'll go a long way to solve those kinds of problems, for sure.
So basically that kind of solves the whole price fixing kind of thing, right? If you have like a stock market for currency.
Well, instant buyouts solve price fixing, and on the item side and on the currency side, having a market also solves that problem. But the market, of course, just being easier for the reason why we sort of had to do a market as well is because the system that we had, we were worried about dogpiling, where like someone puts an item up for a certain price, and then like 1,000 people who have got like some search that's saved or whatever to find cheap stuff immediately, like, oh shit, that item popped up, and they immediately jump on it. And so if that was happening for currency, like whoever puts the cheapest chaos orb up, right, is going to get like 1,000 people going to try and buy it. So you need like a proper market system for that to prevent that kind of dogpiling thing. It's not really as big of an issue for regular items, because there's such a different variety of stuff that you might want to buy, and the trade volumes are so much lower anyway that you don't have that issue quite so much. And also, like, if someone puts up a cheap rare and you're like, then the kind of the race to be the first to buy it is kind of okay, I think. Like that's sort of okay. But if it's like that for just like buying a currency item, I think that would feel pretty lame. So that's why we had to do the kind of market for currency.
Gotcha. And how about like in that halfway mark? Because we have currency like chaos orbs, divine orbs, alterations, and whatnot, and we have like items like crafted items, like helmets, bases, and whatnot. but there's also like the halfway mark, which is basically like 30 blighted maps as an example, and
Yeah.
stuff like that, or like just like
That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. So we are certainly going to allow, so white maps is very easy to allow, right, via a market, because there's no like mods on them that can be fine. We talked for a bit about like different categories, but unfortunately, it's really hard to come up with something that's going to actually be what the players really want with regard to that very consistently, while also making it like a system where you preserve the mods that you can't specify down to the individual mod, at least with the current setup that we have. We might need to later on work out some solutions to that, but I don't think that it's going to be critical on day one to get that stuff exactly right. Like so long as the like base like start system is fun to use and not too annoying, like players will work out what it is that they want to be able to trade in bulk like that, and we may be able to find a solution to that kind of problem later on. But the key thing is having the infrastructure there to just do, like a market system in the first place.
Yeah.
And once you've got that, then you can kind of like start to think about, okay, can we do more categorization? Is there more we can do? One thing I don't want to lose though is I think it's very important that all items are real and come from somewhere. Like someone suggested, like, oh, you could just like have blue maps as a category and like you put it in there and then it just like, like you just get some random map on the other end and like no one will really know. And it's like kind of like I don't really want that to happen. I don't think that's quite right as far as the feel of items. Like it makes them too ephemeral and not like right. So I don't want to do that. I think it isn't good.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. And the last thing that I want to talk about trading and crafting, like we have all this like like this whole player interaction, but about solo self-found and trade league in general. Like if I create a solo self-found character right now, I can I drop the mage blood. I'll transfer over to trade because now I just got a mage blood. Will I still be able to do that, or will there be like a difference between solo self-found and trade?
You'll still be able to do that because I think solo self-found and trade leagues should be balance equivalent. So yeah, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to just migrate your gear because you didn't get an advantage in SSF.
Perfect. Awesome. That's awesome. Now more gameplay element that I also want to talk about, especially the WASD movement. Like it was a very surprising reveal. Like that was definitely not on my bingo card. Like WASD movement for Poe. So what exactly? How do you think this WASD movement is going to impact the gameplay feel in general?
So I think it improves it a lot. Like I was also skeptical before we tried it, and then I tried it, and I really like it. You have to do it right though, and so we put a lot of effort into getting it right. But it just, yeah, I think that is one of the things that just makes combat like feel way better. And it also like doing it sort of led to so many things, like all the moving or shooting stuff that makes the game feel better, and just like yeah, like it's a huge upgrade. And yeah, I'm a WASD player now, for sure. Honestly, like I'm gonna need to spend some time playing Click to Move again before we ship, because I need to make sure that everything, that I'm still happy with how everything's going there. But WSD has been very popular among people in the office. There are certainly people in the office who prefer Click to Move still, but yeah, I'd say a lot of people have converted, and I'm a big fan of it.
Since different characters have like a different feel when it comes to like how they move and whatnot, like maybe I'll want my range character to WSD, and my other character I'll want to use like just a mouse movement.
It could happen. I mean, it really just comes down to like just give it a shot. It's very easy to switch. You just click of a button and you switch. So you can always just see how it feels. But yeah, as I said, like I expected also that I would prefer it more on range than melee, but I ended up enjoying it on melee just as much, if not more. I really like it.
Awesome. But we have like presets. Like I play WSD, I'll press one button, I'll change my whole keybind arrangement.
So basically the key bindings are unique to each control scheme, so you can change from one to the other and have the control scheme switch over when you do. Yeah, that just means that it's like handy for that.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's kind of important because like obviously we need to we can't have W be a skill bind anymore once once you're a WSD. Yeah. So so it needed to do something like that.
Alright, perfect. That's awesome. That's the one I talked earlier. Oh yeah, this one this was sent by a friend of mine, Broken Coda. He's an EA Ballista lover. So basically several builds in PoE right now, such as EA Ballista, have been at the top of the pack. They're basically like, when people ask me what league starter should I play, like it will definitely be there in the list. Will PoE2 have a similar system of balancing out where some builds will be like a clear recommended build?
I mean, I wouldn't say that that's an intentional thing on our part. Like, there are builds that the community believes are easy builds, if you know what I mean. And I'm sure that will just happen naturally due to the fact that, you know, like, balancing's up that way. But it isn't an explicit goal. It's just one of those things that, you know, that happens. The other thing I would say is that like, it'll probably take a while for the community to realize what things are good and bad for starters and so on, like that kind of stuff. So, you know, I guess we'll see what happens. But as I said, it isn't really an intentional thing. It's more just an artifact of the way that certain skills happen to work, and you know, certain items happen to get and this kind of stuff. So, you know, yeah, that just is how it ends up being.
Gotcha, perfect. There was one change that I saw that was pretty interesting, and I think you kind of talked about this, but just to elaborate a bit more on this, you guys stated that fusing orbs are no longer in the game. Like, there will be no fusing orbs anymore. What sort of other itemization changes, especially with currency, are you guys planning on having? Just like you talked about the Chaos Orb, could you like give us
like
so
the reason fusing orb isn't in the game is because you know, the way that sockets work is completely different. There's been a lot of these things that have changed, like, yeah, to solve specific problems, like the Chaos Orb there. In the case of the currency for sockets, though, a lot of that just changed because the system has changed so much. And over time, we've honestly continued to relax some of the things around that. Like, I don't know how much I want to give away with here because like there's still more to announce about it. But ultimately, yeah, like we've done things like we've removed what's it called, scouring. Because we wanted, once again, to be that you have to find more white bases if you're going to like do, you know, like I think that's pretty important, to not just be able to reuse the same white base over and again. Like, it's just the same kind of problem that Chaos Orb had. That's another example. Like there's a few other things like that, but yeah, in the case of fusing, it's just literally like there's no point. The concept of an unlinked socket once you've got a separate gem that has individual sockets in it doesn't make sense anymore, right? Now, the funny thing is that Fusing Orb does exist in the game. It just does something different than it did before. Yes, it does actually exist. We've used the same name of the currency, but for a different purpose. I don't think we've talked about it before, so I don't know that I want to spoil it here either. But basically, yeah, we are repurposing some of that stuff to do other interesting things. One thing I will say is that fusing, it's going to be a sort of late game character power thing that you can use later on. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. We haven't actually experimented with that fully yet. Like, we've got an idea for what we want it to be, so that's why I kind of don't really want to talk too much about it. But we've got something in mind for it in any case.
Gotcha. People are gonna make a lot of theories of like the.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, I'm starting to think about stuff right now, like sort of like a fusing becoming sort of an awakener orb kind of thing, but for like regular items. But
talk about it yet.
Yeah, but just throwing it out there, there. But yeah, next one. Oh yeah, damage over time. That's a big one that I've received as well. Right now, damage over time has a hard cap in PoE. Are we looking at another hard cap PoE too?
I believe that I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is that the reason for the hard cap is not so much because we added a cap, but more because we ran out of like space in a value, you know. Like it's just like 32-bit integer, like it got to the max and then we can't go any further kind of thing. And I'm pretty sure the determination was just made of like the damage that it already has is enough that we don't need to worry about it. Because any further is like kind of not really useful as such, which I could be wrong about. I'm not a PoE1 expert, and it's possible that things have evolved in that regard. But as I said, my understanding is that the hard cap is more of a technical issue. That being said, I would hope that wouldn't be an issue in PoE2 just because of the way the scaling is and all that sort of stuff. It would be possible to solve that by effectively having two stats. Like, you have a stat called like damage over time, another one called like damage over time overflow, and then you have to like make a bunch of it, you know, like it's like it would be a whole annoying thing to do. But it could be done. or some other interpretation. There's probably other ways, but honestly, like it didn't feel. My understanding, at least from like not really having talked about anyone on the PoE1 team about this for a long time, is that yeah, it's more just like they didn't feel like this was a problem that needed fixing particularly, and ideally we just wouldn't run into it in PoE2 anyway.
Interesting. All right, awesome. So I can expect my EK Ignite build in PoE2 to like go ham.
I mean, I would expect so, but as I said, I'm pretty sure they go pretty ham in PoE1 also.
Yeah, that's true.
So you know.
All right, awesome. I'll hear this projectile question that we already covered, and I just want to go back to this question that I had. What is the outlook for melee right now?
Well, I mean, I like it. Probably my favorite class to play at the moment is warrior. I'm enjoying it a lot at the moment. You know, like it's the primary reason that we can make melee good in PoE2 is basically better rigs and the animation team able to make like lots of custom stuff for it. So that just means that we can actually make what we need to make as far as making melee feel good. So yeah, it was never really a balance question in my mind. I mean, you know, it is somewhat. That isn't quite true because there are melee balance problems in PoE1 also, but which I believe that, you know, we may get addressed at some point, but it can never really be fixed like it can in PoE2 because PoE2 just has all the ability to animate characters in a way that you can get you know, like proper closing attacks and things like that, and you know, so it just ends up working better.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it's good.
Perfect. Also, right now there's several builds in PoE that makes a player practically immortal. Like if you just stack elemental resistance, your conversion, whatnot, you basically become an immortal character. Will there be like changes in the defensive layers to create like a soft cap so players don't get that immortal feeling in their characters?
This is something we've been working on recently, and I honestly can't answer that fully because, as I said, you know, we were just discussing armor a few days ago. There's still other questions, like all that sort of stuff is up in the air right now. I don't think that it's in the right place at the moment, and I don't know yet what the right place is. I'm not really a fan of caps particularly, generally speaking, so I'd prefer to avoid that. That being said, there are a lot of caps in PoE1, which I also don't love. You know, like that kind of stuff kind of gets to me a little bit. So yeah, I honestly don't know what the result will end up being, but we are currently remodeling and redoing it right now. Quite literally right now, yeah, armor equation is on the bench is being discussed about what should it be. We've got a few candidates, but you know, it's a tough one.
That's interesting. Like the thing you mentioned about caps and whatnot. Like, what is the alternative in your mindset of?
Oh,
like,
so you
caps?
can do effectively diminishing returns, but you can't do diminishing returns on something like resistance, like just fire resist, for example. And a lot of people would say, oh, you should turn fire resist into a rating, and then it can have diminishing returns. You know, like how armor is a rating, you could have fire resist be a rating. But I actually don't love ratings either because I find them not understandable. Like people are just used to the idea that armor is a rating. Like there's no like obvious like unit of armor that you would want to have. So therefore it just ends up being kind of a number that just kind of translates into some kind of damage resistance. But and people are fine with that. But I don't really want to change fire resist to a rating like other games do. And games do that, and it makes them very easy to balance compared to having flat resistances. But I still don't like the feel of it. Like I like to see like plus, you know, 10% fire resistance and know that, you know, I'm taking 10% less damage from fire and that's fine. You know what I mean? Like I like that simplicity. So ideally we wouldn't lose that. But yeah, more than ideally, like we won't lose that. I won't let that go. So but then once again, then you start to need to have like resistance caps and stuff like that, and you know that's how you end up with that system. And then you end up having like, well, you need max resistance, and there's a cap for the cap, and you know, like yeah, it's not, some of that stuff isn't great, but I guess I still prefer it to having a rating for fire resistance. Like I don't want just like plus 112 fire resistance points. I just find that kind of unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not as clear as well. Like having a flat percentage right there is.
Yeah,
like,
it isn't.
Yeah,
it isn't.
Well, I like the way the system is right now. I'm glad to hear that you guys are keeping that.
Mm-hmm.
The next one right here. Here, how much of a difference are you looking at the Ascendancy system from PoE to PoE2?
So the system is fundamentally the same in that you get to pick an Ascendancy class, and then those are the nodes. Like all of those details are equivalent. It just comes down to what the classes are, and I can't really discuss any of them today. But yeah, ultimately the system is the same. You pick a class. There are 3 Ascendancies for that class, and you hopefully you will find that the things in those classes are broadly applicable to a wide range of builds, even if they seemingly obviously should work with what that class does. They should also have some applicability to a different build as well. That's kind of what our ideal is when we're balancing them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's hopefully we still achieve that.
Yeah, I've been trying to fish like some information about about a few things, but you're really sharp.
Right.
All right, so will mana reduction for skill costs still be a thing? And for the people who are still not aware, how did mana reservation change for PoE2?
Yeah, so we changed mana reservation into Spirit, which is like a special reservation what do you call it, resource that you can that you use for reservations. It's actually undergone a few changes recently, nothing like really majorly substantial that needs to be announced or anything, but like in terms of just how it's balanced, how much you get, like where you get it from, this kind of thing has changed quite a bit as we've been doing some more minion balance. But we'll still probably have mana reduction costs as stats. It's a stat you can give away. I don't know that it necessarily will serve exactly the same role that it did in PoE 1, but I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable stat. But yeah, there shouldn't be as necessary to get, just due to the lack of the... sorry. Oh,
bless you.
Just due to the reservations. Thank you. Just due to the reservations changing. So the way that works.
Bless you again.
Yeah, no problem.
This next one is one of my favorite things in PoE, but I do understand that it's sort of complex to a few people and might be something that you guys are looking at, which is cluster jewels in general. Like, I love how it brings complexity into like skill trees and how you can like modify the skill tree to your way to a certain extent. Right. And how are you guys looking at cluster jewels for PoE2?
So I doubt they will be in on the start of early access, but it's something I certainly want to get back in again because I do like them. They are very cool. So we just have to work out what reward system we're going to produce them from. I think that can be a fun thing, but it feels like the kind of thing that makes sense to do like in like a little bit further in rather than right at them day one. So yeah, we'll probably explore that a little bit later. Gotcha. But the system exists for it. We've got all the tech for it there. Like, it's easy to do if we want, as soon as we want to do it. It's just a question of like, where should we put it, what should go in it. One thing that with jewels in general we want to be careful of is I do think that some of the mods ended up being too similar to the mods you can get from other sources, and I think it's cooler when jewels allow you to find new things you can't get anywhere else. So that's kind of my belief. That's sort of important. There's some argument as to whether that's the case in PoE 1 or not, but I guess that's an important thing for me for jewels.
Talking about jewels, with the adorned jewels, for example, like, is that sort of system something that you plan on bringing over to PoE 2? Because it is sort of like not build enabling, but it's such a strong system to boost builds and dump currency.
I honestly can't say exactly what that'll end up looking like. That particular thing has not been discussed at all. Yeah, I'm sure there will be a discussion at some point, but I don't know where we would go with that.
Gotcha, makes sense. And support builds. I have quite a few friends who love playing R bots, curse bots in general. Will there be a different way to play support right now?
So one of the things that PoE 2 does have is that there's a lot more states you can put on monsters or even in the world that other players can take advantage of. So, I mean, like, we've shown some of them before. Like, for example, there's Armor Break is like a new ailment that can go on monsters. There's a lot of things that take advantage of that. And there's quite a lot of effects in PoE 2 that consume ailments to do another thing. So if you can have one character that's very good at applying and one character that's very good at taking advantage of it, that can be a way to be a support. But also things like, placing a volcano in the world, and then you've got a slam character who plays around like that. You can very much build characters to work together very well there, and more specifically than I think you can in PoE 1 overall. But of course, we still have auras. If you want to build your character entirely around spirit, you can have a significant number of them. One change with auras, though, that I think is kind of important is that auras, we're trying to make sure that the auras are multiplicative rather than additive for most of the effects that they give. And I think that's pretty important because the additive auras that we have right now effectively allow you to bypass parts of the build system, which I think it would be fine if it was across players. But what auras are mostly for in PoE 1 right now is for just adding values to yourself and not really using it to support other players. Just flat values of things so that you don't even have to invest in that thing at all. And I'm not too happy with that. So that's the kind of thing that we want to look at addressing. We haven't done balance on that yet, but it has already been a thing we've discussed of making sure that we've got more multiplicative effects there. So what that might mean is that rather than having an aura that gives someone energy shield, it would be an aura that multiplies the energy shield they have. And that can change quite significantly the dynamic around that, because if you're going to use that just for yourself, you have to invest in an energy shield still in order to be able to utilize that. So that's the kind of thing that can be, I think is pretty important with regard to that.
It also changes what your support, if you have an support player's playing with you, has to invest into. That's pretty clever.
Sure. So that's something that that is a change.
Really good change. Also, we have different. You basically just said that we have different ailments now, right? That was a question. I was going to talk about ailments. You just talked about the armor break, so let's just skip that.
There are certainly more ailments. Yeah.
Awesome, perfect. And this one is a big one for me. I've been playing
the contentious magic find topic.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been playing for a while now, and every single league I end up defaulting to magic find because I am the kind of guy that will it's just there. It's just super strong right now. I feel like it is the best way to get currency usually. So
last time I went on a podcast, I said to the community, I will talk about this again with the design team, and I certainly did, and we had a bunch of arguments, and it was there was certainly some heated discussions about this. At the end of the day, the thing that a lot of players I think would want to hear is, we're just removing it entirely. But the argument that we couldn't escape was that Magic Find was in PoE 1 for years and wasn't a problem, and then it became a problem, and the reason it became a problem, I think, was just because it literally just became too strong. And one thing that PoE 2 is doing is quant is just not a thing. There's just no item quant anywhere. You cannot get it. Everything is rarity, and rarity is designed to make it so you find more good, more currency and things like that as well. But you don't get more items. And in fact, the only source of quant is technically is party play, right? In parties, you have to get more items because there's more players. So basically, what that means is that that right there kind of already nerfs Magic Find a very significant degree. Now we still have the mods for it, and I don't think they're going to go away. But I also think that what it will return to is more of a early PoE days kind of level where it's there. You can use it. It's not gonna you might use it if you have excess damage. You probably won't just go out of your way to do Magic Find being the only thing. I think that probably will not be the case. But it is still there. It's another access you can do if you really want to. But yeah, it should be sort of back to more normal levels without being such a problem that it is in PoE 1 right now.
So it's more kind of like a complementary thing now instead of your whole build is defined.
Rather than it should definitely not be mandatory.
Gotcha.
One thing you might find interesting now that we've reached this particular moment in time, because right now there is a Sony State of Play running, and I believe right at this moment, as we're recording this, we've now had a new announcement.
Wait, really?
Yes. Which is that Path of Exile 2 is going to have couch co-op.
Oh, that's awesome!
So, as I said, I believe that right now is the time when that's getting announced, so it's okay for me to tell you that. This is one of those features that has been requested for a long time. Like a lot of people, even just internally, like a lot of people, are like, oh yeah, totally play this, like with my girlfriend or whatever. Like if you had couch co-op, so that's something that we've got now, and it's actually really awesome. Like we've been playing it in the studio for a little while, and it's really cool. So I just thought you might want to know that because yeah, you're missing out on the trailer right now for that has that in it.
That's perfect because, like, at least my first experience with PoE, it was really hard for my friend to like teach me stuff because it was remotely and whatnot, and it's really hard for me to like teach my fiance anything about the game. So having that couch co-op is super awesome. That's something people are going to be really happy to hear. I'm gonna be watching the trailer right after here.
Okay.
That's awesome. And you talked about this topic, while we're talking about Magic Fight, just party play and group play. Like we have been having like a lot of discussions in the community overall about like how party play is balanced out, how single player is like is different from party play when it comes to loot and like optimization and whatnot. Is that being addressed at points here, or are we like staying in the exact same way?
So it isn't exactly the same. We've made changes. I don't know for sure whether or not those changes will address fully the issues. But one thing that I did do recently that I think can matter is so we've had a look at all of the like different multipliers for like what monsters get and what players get and so on, and we're kind of trying to address those. One of the things that's slightly less intuitive from an item system perspective is that we realized that the way we were increasing the amount of drops that players got from the item system, I don't think was right. So now what we're doing is we're actually dividing up the items by class and then working out like what do you need more of when you're in a party versus what don't you. So for example, for currency, you do want 100% more currency per player because anyone would want to pick that up. But if you're talking about like weapons, well, because most weapon types are not going to be shared by people in the party, you don't need to increase the number of weapon types you're getting by as much. But then on the other hand, jewelry is something anyone could want. So you want jewelry to increase. And basically, we just looked at all the item types and we're like, okay, every single different item type has a different increase in drop rate per party member, whereas before it was all flat. So that should result in a better experience as far as getting more of what you need and not more of what you don't need in party play, as well as just looking at things like like what is the relative balance. There's also a few other details like that we sort of have to worry about. Like, so as I said, there is more synergy between party members, but that's easier to access. And so then we have to look at things like like how various debuffs work, like how poise works when you've got party play. Like the goal is effectively to make it so that it is balanced, like it is fun to play with a party. It's not mandatory, but it is fun to, and you don't feel like a disadvantage. But it's just a tough nail to hit exactly on the head. So basically what I'm getting with all that is that we're trying. There are changes occurring to make it right. Whether or not we exactly hit that to be perfectly balanced across party versus single player, it remains to be seen. But I certainly want it to be that it feels equivalent as far as like what you're getting, and because what you're supposed to be getting out of party play is more fun because you're playing with your friends, not so much that it's a thing that you have to do or a thing that you feel at a disadvantage at. So that's kind of what I want to achieve.
Makes total sense. And I had a few questions about competitive. Oh no, this is actually like one of the competitive environment questions, because like it or not, party play is currently a competitive environment thing, but also for the more competitive players, can they look forward to race events?
So I would love to do it. I love the race events, race seasons and everything when we had them. That was really cool. It was just a question of time. We just need someone who's able to manage that and like do that and and like care about that, and then organize all the stuff that needs to go into like getting them tested, getting them all that sort of stuff. Like if we had that, like, so when race events were happening, when that was a thing, Mark just did that, and he became busy doing other things, and then he wasn't able to do it anymore. So effectively, we just need someone who's into that to be able to do that. So if we have that, if there's some time, I'd love to do it. I think it's cool. The reason I guess why it's not like a bigger priority, like the reason why it's kind of in that category is because even though it was awesome and I really liked it and it had a really cool vibe in the community and everyone talks about loving it, it never really resulted in any particular things in terms of like players sticking around or more players or anything like that. It just never really resulted in any of that. So it kind of meant that like when it came to like making new content versus doing race events, the race events kind of got the short shrift there. But as I said, I like them. I want to do more of them. It's just a question of getting time. So if we had the right person to do it, then I'd love to do it.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, like race events are awesome to watch. Like I miss watching like those whole live race events where you see the guys like on the
Sure.
stage. Those are really fun.
Yeah.
Those are really fun. And for the final remarks, I have like 4 last questions that I'd like to ask you. And thank you as well. Like I would just like to thank you for your time here as well. Like it's really awesome to have this opportunity to like ask you these questions, and this is awesome. This is just awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
So the last 4 questions. What class? You already said that Warrior is your favorite class.
Yeah,
So
some
the
Warriors
last-
are my favorite right now. I'm really enjoying it.
So the last 3 questions right now is what are you most looking forward to players trying out in PoE2?
I think probably the thing that is the most transformative as far as like trying this out and thinking, oh yeah, man, that's really cool, is WASD, just the feel of that and like how the combat feels now. I think that's something that like people will love when they try it. We had really good responses from that when we did the LA event. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, no, this actually makes a lot of sense when they, so I'm pretty confident about that one, and I think it's going to be a big deal.
Awesome. I'm excited to try that out. And talking about trying it out, when we'll be able to like test out the game?
Well, so at the moment we're just saying later this year. We don't have an exact date for people at the moment. There'll be some like sort of little internal alpha-y things that will get like some players to do, but like that'll be exclusive enough that probably almost anybody listening to this is not going to be able to get into it, unfortunately, because we need to do some of that internal testing. But yeah, it'll be later on this year. We're going to have the early access period, and then anyone who wants to will be able to try it out.
Anyone.
Well, I mean, it's not. It'll be run like previous betas that we've done, where like there's various conditions for getting in, but but if you look at previous betas, you'll see how it will work.
Gotcha.
But effectively, I don't have an exact date, unfortunately. It's always one of those things where like we previously announced a date and we were pretty sure of it, and now we're feeling a bit scared because when you announce dates, it's like you could miss them, and then everyone kind of looks at you differently, I guess. So all we're promising is that it's going to be this year, and then we'll get an exact date when we're a little bit more ready.
Awesome. And the last thing is, do you have anything you want to say to the Brazilian/Portuguese audience that's listening to this right now?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm really looking forward to when you guys are able to play. Hopefully the servers are going to be good, good for where you guys are. We try to make that stuff all right. I just want as many players as possible from anywhere where they come from to be able to enjoy the game. We do have a lot of players from Brazil. I think it's a pretty good one. I've only been there one time. Hopefully I can come again someday.
Where have you been here?
It was just a Sao Paulo.
Gotcha.
Like it was a marketing event. We went and did that. But that was a long time ago now, and it's been a while. It would be nice to go back again. And also, I didn't really get a chance to really see the anything really. Then it was just kind of like fly in, like talk to a bunch of journalists, and fly out again. So at least I got a chance to. Sorry, I'm probably going to pronounce this terribly, but a churrascaria, the meat.
Oh yeah, the churrascaria
restaurant. Yeah. So I've got a chance to go to one of those at least. So so that's good.
Yeah, if you come over to São Paulo again, I'll show you a really nice churrascaria for you to eat some nice meat here.
Yes, okay, right. That's how you pronounce it. I'm terrible pronunciation, but yeah, all good.
Right, but
anyway,
thank you so much on it. This was awesome. I'd also like to thank Speedos and Broken Kodo, which are my 2 friends who basically helped me a lot with these questions and also helped me when I was getting started in the game and keep helping me and whatnot. And if you have anything else you want to say, like before we close off the interview.
I guess not. Check out that couch co-op trailer we just launched, and hopefully I'll get to see some of you guys playing the game. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. All right.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.